during Tuesday night into Wednesday morning, meaning Wednesday's a very different day with showers up and down the land. Rain showers for the majority, but some snow still across the far north. Those showers zipping through on a fairly brisk wind, so there will be some sunny spells, but that wind is going to bring a chill as well. Colder air moving in right across the UK. We may still get up double figures across the south, but add on that wind and it will feel a lot colder, and temperatures dropping sharply across the far north with that snow slowly easing.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls, and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate, and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, how can we trust those in power to make vital decisions if they can't even answer the question, can a woman have a penis? I'll give my backing to the brave movement of women who are demanding an answer from every politician standing in next month's local elections in my digest. Plus, I'll reveal what happened when we descended on Westminster to grill the establishment on that hot-button issue of our time. My superstar panel will get their say soon too. Tonight, they are Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, senior reporter at the iNewspaper Benjamin Butterworth, and social commentator Esther Kraku. As a 6-foot trans goalkeeper is selected for the England University's female side, is the war on women's sport only just beginning? Former Team GB marathon star Mara Yamauchi is speaking out despite being threatened with abuse and accusations of bigotry. She's here at 10:20. Was it right for Zelensky to appear at the Grammys in the middle of a war?
Our musicians wear body armor instead of tuxedo. They sing to the wounded in hospitals.
His battle cry to lovies, who, let's face it, are only there for gongs and gift bags, has split opinion. I'll get my panel's verdict at 10. Breaking tonight as police arrest 275 climate activists following fuel protests across the UK. Is Just Stop Oil's demand for the government to quit using fossil fuels too extreme? I'll battle it out with a leading figure from the group that's ground Britain to a halt, and campaigner Lois Perry, who's petitioning to end the UK's fracking ban. A fiery debate coming up in The Clash at 9:20. Why are the BBC, ITV and Sky News scaremongering over COVID again? Our positive Professor Carol Sikora investigates at 9:45. And is the MSM's COVID flip-flopping to blame for scepticism about the war? Writer and lawyer Helen Dale, who became an expert on Ukraine while researching her award-winning debut novel almost 30 years ago, is uncancelled at 10:40. Why has the left declared a Falklands war culture war? Neil Oliver weighs in on The Guardian effectively handing the islands to Argentina in The Outsider at 9:30. And should police be able to work from home? We'll debate that in the Media Buzz at 10:30. Plus, I'll be bringing you a first look at tomorrow's newspapers throughout the show, and I'll crown my first Greatest Britain and Uni and Jackass of the weekend before the night is out. This is Dan Wootton tonight. Let's go. Just one thing first, though. Britain lost a great today, folks. The woman who created the best soap character of all time in Dot Cotton. June Brown will go down alongside the equally great Queen of Albert Square, Barbara Windsor, and Corrie legends like William Roach, Helen Worth, and the dearly departed Liz Dawn and Betty Driver as the human representation of a golden age of the soap genre when the nation would stop to watch their nightly performances. So today I celebrate the genius, humanity and wicked sense of humour of June Brown, someone who you just wanted to be around. I loved her.
So when I've done all this, I'll press this one.
No, not that one. That clears it all and you'd have to start all over again.
Oh.
You press that one.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm sure.
Well, if you say so, Nigel.
Right. I'll be back about 2.
How'd you get the internet on this?
No, I've told you, Mrs. C, it's not connected to the internet.
Well, it ain't a very good computer then, is it?
Well, 60 years, I think. I've actually got my Jubilee, yes, 60. Or diamond wedding, or whatever it is. Yes, I haven't, but I think I've got this a lot for charity work because particularly in the early days of EastEnders, you know, at the beginning, I did a lot. And I still do as much as I can, but I don't have the stamina that I used to have.
She worked till the end, though. I think it should have been Dame June Brown. And today, I can't shake the feeling of deep regret that EastEnders missed the opportunity to give both her and Dot Cotton, the character she so expertly created, the send-off they had earned. More on that later in the Media Buzz with my superstar panel. Here they are, the Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, senior reporter at the newspaper Benjamin Butterworth, and social commentator Esther Kraku. But keeping us posted with the news tonight, it's Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you. The top story tonight, the Foreign Secretary Liz Truss has said Russia cannot remain a member of the UN Human Rights Council, given what she says is strong evidence of war crimes in Ukraine. The group, Human Rights Watch, say they've collected evidence of Russian forces committing war crimes in multiple Ukrainian cities, including sexual violence, executions of civilians and mass graves. The Kremlin denies any accusations related to the murder of civilians, but Liz Truss has urged the international community to strengthen sanctions on Russia.
We need to announce a tough new wave of sanctions. The reality is that money is still flowing from the West into Putin's war machine, and that has to stop.
Liz Truss, and in the meantime, there has been much international condemnation of suspected war crimes in Ukraine. France is expelling 35 Russian diplomats and Germany is expelling 40. The White House says sanctions alone won't stop the conflict. US President Joe Biden has called for a war crimes trial over civilian killings.
You saw what happened in Wootton. This warrants him, he is a war criminal. But we have to gather the information. We have to continue to provide Ukraine with the weapons they need to continue the fight. And we have to gather all the detail so this can be have a war crime trial.
Joe Biden. Well, away from the war in Ukraine, environmental scientists are warning without immediate action to cut greenhouse gases or face the catastrophic aspects of climate change. A UN report says it's necessary to keep temperatures from rising above 1.5 degrees by substantially reducing the use of fossil fuels. The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres says the world must triple the speed of switching to renewables.
The jury has reached a verdict, and it is damning. This report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is a litany of broken climate promises. It is a file of shame, cataloguing the empty pledges that put us firmly on track towards an unlivable world.
Antonio Guterres. Well, here the government will proceed with plans to privatise the television company Channel 4. Ministers have said government ownership of Channel 4 is holding it back and that the sale will help sustain the UK's public service broadcasting. A Channel 4 spokesperson said it was disappointed with the decision. In an internal email seen by PA News, Channel 4's chief executive said the priority was to look after all staff. And as Dan was telling you earlier on, EastEnders star June Brown, best known for playing the character Dot Cotton in EastEnders, has died at the age of 95. Her family says she passed away peacefully at her home in Surrey last evening. EastEnders executive producer Chris Clenshaw said her portrayal of Dot Cotton made a huge impact on British television, which entertained the nation and at times changed it for the better. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+, you're with GB News. Now more from Dan Wootton tonight.
It seems chilling and almost unbelievable that in 2022, a new women's rights movement, the most historically significant since the suffragettes, has been launched to protect biological females. But I have no doubt that this movement is now imperative and urgent. And here's why. This past month, we have seen senior politician after senior politician, from the leader of no opposition Keir Starmer to the Chancellor Rishi Sunak, fail to state biological fact and acknowledge the identity of women.
Is a woman?
Well, I thought the Prime Minister answered this brilliantly in Prime Minister's Question Times, in Prime Minister's Questions this week, and I fully agree with him.
And so what is your definition of a woman?
As I said, I would exactly agree with what the Prime Minister said at Prime Minister's Question Time.
When we're having a social media or a debate around whether what genitalia someone's got, I think it really debases the serious issues that people face.
A woman can have a penis.
I don't think that discussing this issue in this way helps anyone in the long run.
People are complex, that they are different.
Well, I have to say that there are different definitions legally around what a woman actually is. I mean, you look at the definition within the Equality Act, and I think it just says someone who is adult and female, I think, but then doesn't say how you define either of those things.
Is it transphobic to say only women have a cervix?
Look, is it transphobic? Look, I don't even know how to start answering these questions.
Unbelievable. And it didn't get any better when I sent my senior producer Ben Leo to Westminster either.
A quick question that Sir Keir Starmer has struggled with in recent days. Can women have penises?
You'll have to ask the Prime Minister first.
What does he think? Do you know?
Don't know.
Doesn't take into consideration how women feel about it and women's rights. Surely it's a simple answer that women can't have penises? We're just asking if women can have penises. Is it something you'd like to elaborate on?
I don't know.
You don't know?
No, they can't, can they?
Can women have penises?
I'm not going...
I'm just asking people a simple question, whether women can have penises.
I'm not prepared to answer that because I don't know enough about the subject. But thanks very much for asking.
You don't know enough about men or women's simple biology? Can women have penises? Can women have penises? Sir, Ben from GB News, can women have penises?
It's this dystopian climate in Westminster where the toxic nature of identity politics is colliding with cancel culture, which makes politicians too terrified to state a basic fact. But it's got to end. And that's why I endorse the launch of the new campaign, Respect My Sex If You Want My Ex, whose leaders, Caroline Fisk, Maya Forstater and Heather Binning, have sent a serious warning shot to our gutless leaders ahead of the May local elections. The new campaign brings together the brains behind groups Women Uniting, Sex Matters and the Women's Rights Network. Here's Heather at the group's Westminster launch at the weekend.
Well, we'd like to see sex recognised and be able to speak about sex and not be called cervix havers and womb havers and all the other things that some elements of society want to start introducing. We're not afraid to be women, we're not afraid to be called women. And that's what we want to get back to, a place where we're called women and we can say those words out loud.
Now, Respect My Sex If You Want My Ex is encouraging the general public, both male and female, by the way, to quiz their politicians on that basic question. Can a woman have a penis? And as Maya Forstater says, local authorities are critical decision makers on issues as diverse as single-sex services, such as changing rooms and sports centres and toilet facilities in parks, to the guidance given to schools about sex education and how they respond to children who are gender questioning. She added in the Daily Mail over the weekend, our hard-fought rights are now being turned against us. Every rule and policy that says something is for women is being changed so that it's now for people who self-identify as women, whatever their sex. The time has come for women to fight back. The days of politicians disrespecting our rights and thinking we will still vote for them are over. Respect my sex if you want my ex is clear, just like I am, that trans folk must not be discriminated against and should fully participate in society. But just not at the cost of precious areas like women's sport and the protection of young girls. To respond now, my superstar panel, the Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, senior reporter at the newspaper Benjamin Butterworth, and the social commentator Esther Kraku. So Benjamin Butterworth, you are a public figure. Respect my sex if you want my ex. Want people like me to ask you a very simple question. Can a woman have a penis?
Oh, boy.
Well, do you know, I don't know why this is happening at the moment, because the only law that has been affected by such questions was introduced 18 years ago. Men have penises and women have vaginas, and there are some other people who will transition because that's how they're built, and that's the case in every country, in every culture, in every period of our history, not in the last year or two. That's a quite straightforward thing, but what's not straightforward is the comment you just made, which is that they're a threat to young girls.
When did I say that?
Dan? That was in your
They
digest.
They can be, and they are. Not just young girls. I'm going to spread it.
The phrase you used at the end.
Women have been raped in prisons by trans prisoners.
Women
are being raped in hospitals. Do you want me to
by
give you the time and date? It's a fact. They have been raped in prison by trans prisoners.
First of all, I mean, you can count.
But Benjamin, you're actually misquoting me. I said that trans folk must not be discriminated against and should fully participate in society, but not at the cost of precious areas like women's sport and the protection of young girls. So don't misquote me.
And how are they a threat to the protection of young girls?
Well, number one, I never used the word threat.
Can I answer that too, yeah?
I never used the word threat, but yes, you answer, Esther.
Well, sir, young women, not just young women in general, are being raped in women's prisons by trans women that suddenly identify as women to enter women's prisons. What was the name of the lady who was recently raped in the NHS hospital ward?
Yes,
by a trans woman.
Do you think if I sat here and said that a black, because of course that person has done is utterly repugnant, but if I sat here and said that a black person had done that and therefore you shouldn't have the same rights, would I be racist?
Well, that's not the same thing. That's not the same thing actually. Because no, that's not the same thing because these are two completely different issues. Black people are not predisposed. Black people are not predisposed to commit crime.
You've just said trans people are predisposed.
No, because
to commit crime,
trans women, so biological men that are taking advantage of this ridiculous system that people like you endorse to go into women's spaces and abuse them is completely different from black people or any person of any other race committing a crime.
Why are trans people predisposed to commit crimes?
Because this is a loose structure that is allowing them to take advantage of a ridiculous system that makes you think.
That's pure bigotry.
Predisposed is the wrong word.
Well, you just said
what it does is what.
No, I'm sorry.
You've said that they undermine young girls.
Yes,
which
because
is
there was
exactly,
evidence
frankly, Dan,
that they were
that's exactly
abusing
what would have
women.
been said about a man like you in the 1980s.
Benjamin, you actually misquoted me, which says a lot about the way that
you
the
said
left...
they undermine the safety of
No, you said that you claimed that I said that trans women provide a threat to young girls. I didn't say that. So you are playing the cultural issue on this.
Can I just come in and say this? You know, we are where we are today with this, not with the trans movement, not because we are a progressive society. It's because we are all of this came around by thoroughly anti-democratic means. The rights that are now around for some trans people came about through mobs, through threats, through bullying. Professor Catherine Stock, who was at university, was hounded out of a university by a mob armed with flares, masked mob. J.K. Rowling. She was hounded out of a job.
And what was changed because of that?
You've just
Sharon Davies.
Just let me answer your question. She was thrown out of a job she'd been in for 18 years because she was threatened by a mob with masks and flares because she dared to say you can't just become a woman if you decide to be one. There's orchestrated campaigns against women all over this land, women who dare to say the truth. You know,
there's no daring about it. There's no daring. All you ever hear is the view that you express, and you're well entitled to it. But the idea that you are brave by saying it is nonsense.
No, you're brave because if you say it, you get bullied and you get threatened and you get chucked out of your job.
Benjamin, the left have cancelled J.K. Rowling. The left have cancelled the left have cancelled J.K. Rowling. You surely cannot be sitting on this sofa and saying that women are not threatened if you tell them what to say.
Rowling. That woman, had she not been as famous and as well known as she is, her career would have been over by now.
It's not over in the slightest.
No, but she has been damaged by this. You can't not accept.
She's been ostracised by Hollywood.
And she's been ostracised. Yes, exactly.
Tell me, gang, if the trans lobby, as you call it, is so powerful
and misogynistic,
and the only voice you ever hear, tell me, name one transgender newspaper columnist. Name one presenter. Name someone on this channel who's transgender.
What's that got to do with anything?
Because your entire thing is that you are the victims and that these awful trans people are reigning over you and you have no power. So name one trans person
but I'll tell you what we'll do.
that has anything like the platform that you have. Just one.
Who is that lady on... Well, and I use the lady very loosely, on Biden's White House
Can I just say something here? We're not here just to answer your specific question.
No.
If you say women haven't been affected like this, back up.
I didn't say that.
Why do you think this movement has been started by these three women? Precisely
because
women's voices are being drowned out just by people like you right now when we're not allowed to say what we feel about the trans.
Why can no mainstream... Excuse me.
Because you're not letting anyone speak.
Why can no mainstream politician define what a woman is? What is so endemic about this issue, this trans issue, that no mainstream politician can define what a woman is?
The definition that you're questioning, and clearly you're all entitled to question it, I'm not stopping you speaking at all.
We're not questioning anything, we're saying it's a fact.
That definition, what year was that written into law?
What do you mean? What, the definition of a woman is a biological, an adult human.
It is written into law.
The definition of a female is an adult female human with the excess chromosome. That's what the definition of a woman is.
Come on, you're all saying that there's this big threat to women in the definition right now.
Well, it is a threat to women.
What year was it changed?
Why do you think a movement...
You don't know what you're talking about.
Why do you not care about the women whose lives are actually endangered by this?
Just answer your question.
It was 18 years ago.
The thing is, you're not actually listening to what we're saying. You're a bloke, you're not a woman. You don't know what is happening to women in this country right now. And their rights are being threatened.
So why does every poll say that most women don't?
He does know. He's just choosing to ignore it. Just like politicians lying about not knowing what a woman is.
All the YouGov polls. The YouGov polls there have been.
Tell me the YouGov poll you're talking about.
It was 2/3 of people said that they wouldn't be bothered.
When was that? I don't... You're just making that up as you go along.
Yes, there have been multiple polls, and you can go around and get them afterwards. I'll tweet it.
So this movement that has started, this backlash that has started in women's sport, this is all made up, is it? They're just all talking nonsense.
No, and let me be absolutely clear. the people in the trans woman that has committed a rape and maybe some other crimes, and by the way, you could count on your fingers the number of transgender people of any description in our prison system. Those people are evil and wrong and should be
But they are given the opportunity to rape biological women by a system that is too scared to take on the trans movement.
Secondly,
that's the point.
I don't think you should base the rights of any group on the prisoners among them. I couldn't care less about people that do something so evil as to rape another person.
You couldn't
and so
care
to
less.
suggest that all the good people that are leading their lives
We're
as
not
normally as they
suggesting
can,
that.
who happen
What
to be
we're
trans,
saying
is wrong.
What we're saying,
Thirdly,
it is opportunist. It is the trans women in prisons, the ones who rape people, it's an opportunist crime for them because the law of this land now allows them to mix with other women. That is not right.
You sound exactly like the people that wrote in tabloids in the 1980s that would find a handful of people who were supposedly gay and who were paedophiles, and they would say they're a threat to children. It is exactly the same argument.
This is nonsense. Benjamin, if you
It's
were
exactly
a
the same
father
argument.
of a young Benjamin, I've given you a lot of time. I've given you a lot of. I don't play identity politics like you, Benjamin.
Well, the identity
what I
politics is
am
what
is
gets trans people
absolutely
killed in the
irrelevant
practice
to
in
this.
this
Stop
what
it.
I am,
50% suicide rate.
What I am defending is the right of parents to worry about their young girls not having safe spaces in changing rooms. I worry about young girls who want to play sport, and the figures that have just come out already show that a lot of young girls are walking away from sport because they think it's intrinsically unfair because of the prospect of trans competitors. And I am all for the rights of trans people living happily in society, but not at the cost of biological women. Not at the cost of biological
women's rights and their freedom to speak. And that's what's happening. We're not being allowed to speak against
In what way can't you
brigade.
speak? You've got a national newspaper column and on television.
And I write about it quite a lot.
And good, you're entitled to write about it, but you can't then claim you can't
But
talk
Benjamin,
about
just
it.
to clarify your position, you believe in self-ID with no medical backup?
Self-ID has been the case for 18 years.
No, it's not law.
I'm asking about your position.
Yes, it is.
No, it isn't. It is in Scotland.
It's
not here.
It is, because in order to get the legal definition, you have to live as your identified gender for 2 years. That is self-ID, and that's been in the case for 18 years.
No, you need a lot more now to do it, and the push is to change the law so you don't need that.
That doesn't go against my argument.
Secondly, Benjamin, do you believe in people who were competing as men as recently as a few weeks ago, being able to compete in female sporting events because they self-ID as a woman?
No. It should be taken on a basis by one basis, because someone that transitioned and started the process at 13 and hasn't evolved in the same way may
What do you
well
mean
be
hasn't evolved? It's still a biological
because they've had
man.
puberty blockers and all sorts, may well be equal to
You can't
the woman
undo male
or the
puberty.
Yes, you can.
And the studies
You can undo
You
puberty.
cannot. You cannot. You cannot. Even if they reach the testosterone levels, they still have bigger muscle mass. They still have bigger lungs. They still have bigger hands. They're still stronger. So you can't take out a lifetime as a man.
That's why I said it should be a case-by-case basis. And if it's completely inappropriate, they shouldn't compete. That's absolutely fine.
Okay.
That's called logic. You should try it.
There's not much logic from you tonight,
if you can't win with logic,
just a quiet start from my superstar panel, Carol Malone, Benjamin Butterworth and Esther Kraku, who will be here all evening. Still to come. Why have the left decided 40 years on that the Falklands belong to Argentina? Neil Oliver weighs in on the culture war raging over Britain's historic battle in The Outsider. But first, is Just Stop Oil's demand for the government to quit using fossil fuels too extreme? A leading figure from the group terrorising Britain's motorists goes head-to-head with the pro-fracking campaigner, and I want to know your thoughts on this. Dan at gbnews.uk, at gbnews on social media. I'll bring you the results after the break.
Hello again. A wet day to come across Scotland tomorrow, whereas much of the UK will be dry and bright. But it's not just rain for Scotland, because across the north of Scotland we could see some heavy snow, and there is a Met Office yellow warning in place. For most it's turned a lot milder. In between these two weather fronts is some pretty warm air, but this one is sinking south, allowing the cold air to return across the far north. So some wintry showers across Shetland and Orkney. Damp for northern England, particularly to the west of the Pennines. Rain for Northern Ireland and western Scotland overnight. A bit of drizzly here and there across Wales and southwest England, but much of southern England, eastern England will have a dry night. And look at the temperatures. A mild night, but that cold air in place across the far north means there will be a frost, and with that cold air hitting the wet weather, we're going to see more and more snow coming in during Tuesday. Now, initially just over the hills, but coming down to lower levels across Aberdeenshire, Caithness, Sutherland, could cause some disruptions, certainly by the time we get to Wednesday morning. For central and southern Scotland, it will be rain. We'll see rain working back to Northern Ireland later on in the day, but for most of the day dry here, and certainly for most of England and Wales. It's a dry, fine day on Tuesday, a bit brighter than Monday. Some sunshine in the south. Could see temperatures 15, maybe 16 degrees Celsius. That'll feel pretty warm, whereas it'll just be 2 or 3 in northern Scotland, with the snow likely to intensify here during Tuesday night. So we do have that Met Office yellow warning in place across northern Scotland. Zone of rain then working across England and Wales during Tuesday night into Wednesday morning, meaning Wednesday's a very different day with showers up and down the land. Rain showers for the majority, but some snow still across the far north. Those showers zipping through on a fairly brisk wind, so there will be some sunny spells, but that wind is going to bring a chill as well. Colder air moving in right across the UK. We may still get up double figures across the south, but add on that wind and it will feel a lot colder, and temperatures dropping sharply across the far north with that snow slowly easing.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children, and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls, and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate, and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
Neil Oliver and the Positive Professor on the way, but time now for The Clash. And breaking tonight, 68 Just Stop Oil demonstrators have been arrested over alleged offences linked to protests outside a Warwickshire fuel terminal over the weekend. Activists glued themselves to one of the Kingsbury site tankers on Friday, staying there for about 14 hours, causing major delays to the businesses which supplies hospitals and fire stations. The eco mob have been blockading access to oil and fuel terminals all over England since Friday, as they continue to demand the government stop all new fossil fuels investments immediately. 275 arrests linked to eco-protests have been made so far, but is Just Stop Oil's demand for the government to stop using fossil fuels too extreme? Send me your thoughts to dan@gbnews.uk, tweet @GBNews, and you can vote in our poll there. I'll bring you the results very shortly. But first to debate, this is Just Stop Oil spokesperson and former oil and gas worker Neil Rothney, and director of the climate analysis group CAR26, Lois Perry. Great to have you both here. Neil, let me start with you. The NASA climate scientist James Hansen says that a rapid phase-out of fossil fuels is, on the whole, almost the equivalent of believing in the Easter Bunny and Tooth Fairy. You're not with it, are you, Neil?
Well, it made absolutely no sense to me, that statement. I have no idea who it was that said it or why he said it. It just made absolutely no sense.
Well, he's a NASA climate scientist.
We just had a report out today. We just had a report out today from the IPCC, and it's not about Easter bunnies. You know, it's a very, very grim report suggesting that if we don't start cutting back emissions now, the climate is going to be ravaged.
But Neil, we have started. What you're proposing is cutting them out altogether immediately, which means people freezing in their homes.
Absolutely.
You haven't thought this through, Neil, have you? You haven't thought this through.
Well, let's be clear. The demand from Just Stop Oil is that we stop issuing licenses, that we stop exploring the North Sea for oil and gas, and we stop developing new oil resources. If you want to talk about freezing in your home, we could go straight to the price of gas. Now, the wholesale prices of gas have gone up 4 times in the last year. There has been absolutely no increase in production costs for North Sea gas. Where did the costs come from? They come from profit taking. They come from speculation. That's how people will freeze this winter.
Neil, I want to bring Lois Perry in to respond now. Lois?
That's absolute nonsense. And for them to say that the only thing they're doing is calling for new licenses to not be issued, it's rubbish. They're sitting there, they're blockading, they're obstructing, they don't care about normal people, they don't care about people being able to get to work, they don't care about people being able to get deliveries, they don't care about people, full stop. There's no alternatives at the moment. So even if you believe in all the IPCC stuff, you know, there's no actual alternatives at the moment that actually work. I mean, I happen not to believe in it at all, actually. But, you know, this is just absolutely anti-human stuff. It's disgusting, absolutely disgusting. I mean, it's quite interesting, actually, because they love insulation, insulating homes, all these people. Insulation is used making oil. I mean, where are they coming from? And what is this all about? What, you know, do they actually believe this stuff, or is it just anti-human? Is it actually, you know, just anti-capitalism? Do you know what I mean?
I completely know what you mean, but Neil, I'm trying to understand how you think
absolutely no idea
that
what you
the
meant.
UK should be powered.
Yeah, well, we should be fracking. You know, wind turbines need 100% constant gas.
Yeah.
So wind turbines alone can't actually help us at all.
And not yet. And maybe, Neil, they will in a few years' time once technology has moved on. But the big issue here, and I'm going to quote from Benjamin Hurd from the University of Adelaide, who has done a study reviewing the feasibility of 100% renewable electricity systems, which is what you want. And he says we would be reliant on sources like solar, wind and storage. In those circumstances, it is highly unlikely for renewables to power 100% of the electricity supply. So you are literally proposing, Neil, having no access to electricity, which is taking us back to pre-Victorian times.
Yeah.
Listen, Lucy, the producer, said that we had 10 minutes to talk about just stopping oil. Well, the first thing we're not going to talk about is fracking. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen in the UK.
Yes, it is.
Forget
it is going to
It's
happen.
a red herring,
it is going to
and I'll
happen.
tell you
and
why
it's going to reduce our gas costs. And we need gas to power your beloved wind turbines, actually.
Oil and gas reserves. That's why it's a red herring. The only people who support or who talk about fracking these days are people who either are paid by the oil and gas industry or have shares.
Nonsense.
Well, Neil, I say frack, frack, frack. Are you accusing me of being paid by someone?
Let's frack.
The reason I'm on here tonight is because some very, very courageous, very ordinary, but very courageous people have decided that the warnings that the IPCC have been issuing, that the International Energy Association have been issuing, have gone completely unheeded. So they've gone on the streets and they've raised the alarm.
It's all complete nonsense.
On that basis,
that's why.
You've invited me here to try and explain what the thinking is, why they're doing it, and I'm going to try and do that.
Yes, but what you haven't been able to explain, Neil, is how we are going to provide electricity under your plans.
They don't want to have a
goes
debate.
off,
They
you
just want to
listen to the
obstruct.
alarm.
So I want
You
to
try
obstruct
and
him. Why should he
understand
have his view?
why the alarm goes off. You do not do what you peer at, which is you're shouting. You might as well be looking for the plug to pull the alarm, to stop the alarm. That is not the way to deal with an emergency.
Neil, okay, you've had your say, but can I please ask you a question? How are you proposing, if we stop all fossil fuels, which is what your group wants, immediately, how are you proposing that the UK is going to be fuelled?
Yeah, tell us, Neil.
I'll try one more time. The demand is to stop licenses, new exploration, and the development of new fields.
Why are you sitting in front of lorries then? That doesn't make any sense.
8 years of oil and gas left, which will have to be used in the meantime while we transition to renewables. Everybody knows that.
So why are you blockading the trucks? It doesn't make any sense. Why are you sitting in front of them so ordinary people can't get oil? Why are you doing that? It doesn't make any sense. They're not courageous people. They're deluded and they want attention. And it's sad, actually, really, really sad, because they're actually hurting grannies.
Let me give Neil a chance to respond.
Sorry.
Go on.
Well, no, Neil, Lois says you're deluded. Your response?
There's not a question in that. There are only a string of invective. Look, they're there. They'll tell you why they're there. They are there to alert the people who are not listening to the IPCC and who are not listening to the IEA that there is a major crisis on. Now, they're taking action. I don't care what you call them. They're taking what I think is very, very brave action to bring this home and to get people like me onto your programme to speak to your listeners and to try and get them to look seriously at what is happening. Now,
Neil, do you have any sympathy for the fact... Neil, can I just ask you another question, please? Do you have any sympathy for the fact that we are in the worst squeeze in living standards since the days of rationing, thanks in part to the recent disruptions in global oil and gas supplies? Blockading oil refineries and cutting off the supplies of vital fuels makes that worse.
I tried 2 minutes ago to explain that there has been absolutely no production cost increase in gas. Where have the gas price cost increases come that is driving people into poverty? Where have they come from?
Can I ask you
a question of the market.
Yes, Lois, come in.
It's a question of the markets. Where are they going to sell this gas at hugely inflated prices?
OK, well, Lois, you answer that question. Neil, let Lois answer that question, and then, Lois, you can ask Neil something.
We can control the price for our domestic consumers. But can I just ask you a question? During the medieval warm period and the Roman warm period, was it oil and gas that triggered the global warming that happened at that time? Could you just tell me why the Earth was warm in the Roman period and the medieval period, much warmer than it is now? Can you tell me if that's to do with oil and gas? Were there lots of cars on the road? Can you tell me that, Neil?
No, this is absolute nonsense. In a 10-minute discussion about stopping oil in the midst of a crisis which the International Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Crisis says is absolutely critical, I'm not going to answer that nonsense. It's complete bollocks. You can't
answer the question because it disproves the whole theory. You won't answer the question. Tell me why it was warm in the medieval warm period. Was it because of all the engines and all the cars?
An oil worker of 40 years and 2 broadcasters would make a debate. You need to get serious about this. If you invite me on to talk about why people are taking action against the climate challenge, then you must really use some common sense and ask some sensible questions, and I might be able to tell you. I have 40 years experience working in the oil industry.
Neil,
ask the questions.
Neil, you personally, are you prepared to change your behaviour to link with your group strategy? Because, of course, you fly regularly and you also wear a lot of fast fashion, which is, of course, produced using fossil fuels. Are you prepared to change your lifestyle, Neil, given what you're wanting everyone else to do?
Well, look, being the one person on this programme that's got charisma and good looks, I obviously don't need fast fashion. and I obviously don't need foreign holidays to top up the tan.
Thanks a lot.
Do you think this is usual behaviour for a 69-year-old grandfather? No, it's not. Yes, I am absolutely and utterly committed. But this is how we're going to change the situation. We're going to fight. We're going to continue fighting the government. And they are going to eventually have to concede that they cannot continue with business as usual.
OK. Well, look, Neil, I think you well and truly lost until the answer to that last question where you were completely right. You've got a lot of charisma. You're very good looking. Unfortunately, your views on stopping oil are completely bonkers, but please do come back. That was Just Stop Oil spokesperson Neil Rothney and the director of Card 26, Lois Perry. So who do you agree with on this? Well, Martin on Twitter says, yes, it is too extreme. We need viable, cheap and reliable alternative energy sources in place before phasing out fossil fuels. I agree with that, actually, from DH. Extreme as in completely bonkers and basically just self-absorbed nonsense. But from John, no, it isn't too extreme because we need to get away from that evil stuff. It's responsible for much of the harm on the planet. But your verdict is now in. We've had a few close votes recently, but this one certainly isn't. 93% of you agree that Just Stop Oil's demand for the government to stop using fossil fuels is too extreme. Just 7% of you there with the very charismatic Neil. Now coming up, why are the MSM scaremongering over COVID again? This is a case for our positive Professor Karol Sikora. He'll be here shortly. But first, why have the left declared a Falklands culture war? Neil Oliver weighs in on The Guardian, effectively handing the islands to Argentina. He's the outsider and he's coming up next.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
Positive Professor Karol Sikora and outspoken marathon runner Mara Yamauchi still to come. But now, Neil Oliver is today's outsider. While many used the weekend to reflect on the sacrifice of 255 British servicemen who helped recapture the Falkland Islands 40 years ago, the left was busy concocting a new front in its war on British history. The Guardian decided it was appropriate to call it the Malvinas War, which is how Argentina's murderous generals referred to the Falklands. They proudly trumpeted an article written by Argentina's own Foreign Minister, Santiago Cafero, saying the dispute over the islands isn't finished. This tweet by columnist Samantha Smith summed up the outrage felt by many. She wrote, "It was the Falklands War, not the Malvinas War. They are the Falkland Islands, not Isles Melina. The Falkland Islands are a British overseas territory by choice, and we are proud to have defended their sovereignty." Neil Oliver joins me now. Neil, what did you make of this from The Guardian? Surprised?
Not surprised. I thought it was tasteless to carry a headline like that at such a time. You know, the 40th anniversary of the war, in which 255 British servicemen and 649, I think, Argentinian servicemen died. But to take that moment to raise the spectre of it's being called of that archipelago being called Malvinas, I thought was just in very poor taste. I don't think it's unexpected at all, because I think, as you allude to, there is and has been for a long time an ongoing push to suggest that everything Britain did in the past was bad and only bad, that the British Empire was only bad, that all of Britain's aspirations, for the past 200, 300 years were imperialist and colonialist, and the only negative connotations are to be associated with those ideas. So it's not a surprise. I think it was almost automatic. You could have predicted that the knee-jerk reaction from the left would be that Britain's claim on the Falklands archipelago has to be wrong, despite the fact that whenever polls are taken of, whenever the people of the Falkland Islands are asked about what they want in the future, they've always been staunchly of the opinion that they want to remain British, and I would have thought that should be the most the most significant and the most telling aspect of the story.
No, I completely agree. And of course, Neil, it's this sort of hypocrisy from the likes of The Guardian that really gets me too, because of course, when it comes to Ukraine, they're very insistent that Kiev should be spelled K-Y-I-V and not K-I-E-V. Because they say it's only fair that we outsiders get our language right, and that occupiers must not set rules. So why is it okay for Ukraine, but it's not okay when it comes to the Falklands? There's a real hypocrisy there. There's a mismatch in thinking there.
Well, you use the word occupiers, which is, I think, is very interesting in that context, because it's probably worth stating something that ought to be very obvious, really, that Spain, Britain, Portugal, France, and to some extent the US were all took a turn prowling around, down in the South Atlantic, around that archipelago and in other areas besides. Malvinas is a Spanish name. I think etymologically it relates to settlers from San Malo in Brittany, who were there in the 18th century. That's the origin of that name for that archipelago. Even Argentina is a Spanish name. It's an adjective that means something like silvery, and it relates to how excited the Spanish were about how much silver was to be had coming out of that part of South America, in fact, South America in general. And so, to some extent, Malvinas is as incongruous in that context, you might say, as the Falklands, because nobody really makes any reference or makes any remembrance of the fact that the indigenous population of Tierra del Fuego, Patagonia, were completely destroyed by the Spanish and the Portuguese in the 15th and 16th centuries. The European settlement in that part of the world, saw to the deaths of 90% of the indigenous population. Whatever, if there was ever an indigenous name for that archipelago, 300 miles or so off the coast, then it's long been forgotten. And to just suggest that the Argentinian claim is superior, well, it's almost a philosophical question, because all Europeans in South America are cuckoos in the nest. We were all invaders and interlopers into that part of the world. And then through the 1700s and the 1800s and the 1900s and the 21st century, that we're still fighting over somewhere that, if you go back far enough, it belonged to the indigenous people. So the fact that there's an ongoing dispute about whether we should call it Malvinas or Falklands, is to completely forget something very interesting in historical terms, which is to remember that we were all invaders in that part of the world.
Indeed, no, we're not talking about the indigenous people in this case, are we? No, very good point, Neil. I just wanted to ask you finally about some of the claims by the Argentine Foreign Minister Santiago Cafiero in this piece for The Guardian. He writes, the United Kingdom alleges that there is no sovereignty dispute over these territories. Why then did the British government negotiate with Argentina during that period? Now, further down, he says Argentina is not a threat to anyone. But it doesn't sound to me like Argentina has given up on the Falklands.
It is true to say that I think in the 1950s and 60s, maybe into the 1970s, that there were negotiations and conversations that went on between Argentina and Britain about the future of the Falkland Islands. That's true to say, but then events were overtaken when Galtieri and his junta, in an attempt to prop up a failing regime and desperate for a quick, glamorous victory, went after, the invasion of the Falkland Islands. So events took a turn at that point. But I think I would in the modern context, I've mentioned maybe the prehistoric past of that archipelago and the 16th, 17th, 18th century of that part of the world. But I think surely what matters most are the wishes of the population that is there now.
Yes.
The
Yes.
Falklands. The Falklands had there was an industry established, I think, in the 1800s, which was based around salvaging wrecked ships. Then there was a Scottish farmers who were settled there most successfully, and they began to rear Cheviot sheep. And that industry, that agriculture, became very profitable, and it lasted, and it was successful for a long time. But the fact remains that the settled population that have been there for the longest in what we might reasonably describe as recent history have been Scottish or British, and whenever they have been asked up until the present day what they want their future to be, they want it to be British. Yeah. And in
I agree.
Context,
that is what matters.
on the 40th anniversary of the war in which 255 soldiers were lost, for The Guardian to just revert to calling that archipelago Malvinas just seemed like a deliberate slap in the face.
No, indeed. Perfect point to end it, Neil. Thank you so much. We'll speak again next week. And of course, Neil hosts his very own show, 7 p.m. Saturday nights here on GBNews, and it's unmissable. Now, coming up, is Zelensky right to take aim at France and Germany for their long-standing appeasement of Russia? And did the Ukrainian president make a miscalculation by appearing at the Grammys in the middle of a war? My panel will unpack all of that as the Media Buzz continues. After 10, you'll also get your first look at tomorrow's papers too. But next, they're at it again. The MSM, including the BBC, back scaremongering about COVID. Will they get away with it this time? My positive professor, Carol Sikora, investigates. Stay with us.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children, and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
A first look at tomorrow's newspaper front page is coming out, but first it's time for our positive professor, Carol Sikora. Now, even though we're finally starting to reclaim our lives and live with COVID, the mainstream media refuses to drop it. Just take a listen to this hysterical reporting from Friday evening.
Today's the day we end free COVID testing in England. Who could have predicted it's the same day we've recorded the highest number of infections than at any other time in the pandemic?
COVID cases reached record levels in England last week, with 1 in 13 people infected.
It's still spreading. COVID hospital patients in England is close to January levels. Restrictions and free lateral flow tests are being phased out around the UK, but that doesn't mean the virus is fading away.
At the end of last week, can you believe it, 4.9 million people in the UK had tested positive for the virus.
But Carol Sikora, that figure that woman on Sky News just said isn't actually true. 4.9 million people didn't test positive. It's an ONS estimate, and probably a grossly inflated one at that, right? So why is the media, Carol, back to all of this scaremongering?
I just don't understand it, Dan. I mean, it makes absolutely no sense. We've got to learn to live with the virus. That's the key to how we've got to get out of this. And that sort of scaremongering makes people think, what are we going to do? And people, to be frank, are absolutely bored out of their trees by the virus. They don't want to hear about it. You know, you look at, there's a certain type of person that wants to wear a mask, that wants to take precautions, they carry a can of disinfectant, they always disinfect their hands when they go anywhere. And that's their choice. And let's be clear, people are entitled to choose. But for goodness sake, the responsible media shouldn't be doing this. If you look at the number of hospitalizations and the number of people on a ventilator, it's at the moment 387, which is much lower than it's ever been. It's okay, it's gone up a bit in the last few weeks, but it's completely accountable. And the graph you just saw, the red and the orange graph, half the people in hospital with COVID are there for some other reason completely.
Yes.
It's not a disaster. We've got to get out of this. We've got to learn to live with it as a society.
No, it's incidental, exactly. It's incidental in that case. And Carol, I just think language matters, and it's a disgrace that Sky News doesn't think language matters, because that Sky News reporter says 4.9 million people tested positive for the virus. No, she should state what she actually means, that 4.9 million people might have COVID if you believe the ONS estimates, which are based on a sample, because we're not all testing. So 4.9 million people certainly didn't test positive.
No, and there's a selection process. People that want to get tested have symptoms. You don't go, if you feel well, you're going swimming, you're doing your normal shopping on a Saturday morning, why would you bother with a test? There's some reason these people have done it. So you take a selected sample and you extrapolate from that to a bigger population, you're bound to get different results than if you did the bigger population. And that's the weakness in those statistics. And it really is surprising that the mainstream media keep reporting this gloom and doom scenario. Doctors aren't doing it, especially those that are not involved in COVID, like me. you know, the effects of COVID have wide implications for other diseases, cancer, heart disease, stroke, and so on. And I've said this all the way along. We've got to get our senses back and get on with providing healthcare for everybody.
Carol Sikora with the real stats that you need. Great to speak to you, Carol.
And you, Dan.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, as Biden calls for Putin to be trialed for war crimes, is Zelensky right to take aim at France and Germany for their long-standing appeasement of Russia? And did the Ukrainian president make a miscalculation by appearing at the Grammys in the middle of a bloody war?
Our musicians wear body armor instead of tuxedo. They sing to the wounded in hospitals.
My superstar panel return on that in just a moment. They're already at each other's throats tonight. Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, senior reporter at the newspaper Benjamin Butterworth, and the social commentator Esther Kraku. With their COVID coverage prompting significant amounts of Ukraine scepticism, have the MSM ensured no one ever trusts them again? Writer and lawyer Helen Dale, who became an expert on Ukraine while researching her award-winning debut novel almost 30 years ago, is uncancelled at 10:40. Other left underplaying female anger at the growing trans athlete row. British long-distance runner Mara Yamauchi joins me to speak up for her sporting sisters at 10:20. Should the police be able to work from home? What the hell? I say no way. I want bobbies on the beat, not on the sofa. Plus, why EastEnders bosses should hang their heads in shame for not giving June Brown, who played soap icon Dot Cotton, the send-off she deserved before her sad death today. All that and more coming up in the Media Buzz. Plus, I'll bring you a first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages next and throughout the show. And stay up with us for this next hour because, of course, just before 11, a brand new Greatest Britain and Union Jackass revealed. Before all of that, though, the news headlines at 10 with Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you. The top story tonight, the Foreign Secretary Liz Truss has said Russia cannot remain a member of the UN Human Rights Council, given what she says is strong evidence of war crimes committed in Ukraine. The group Human Rights Watch say they've collected evidence of Russian forces committing war crimes in multiple Ukrainian cities, including gender-based violence, executions of civilians and mass graves. The Kremlin denies any accusations related to the murder of civilians, but Liz Truss has urged international leaders to strengthen sanctions.
We need to announce a tough new wave of sanctions. The reality is that money is still flowing from the West into Putin's war machine, and that has to stop.
Liz Truss, well, there has been international condemnation of suspected war crimes in Ukraine. France is now expelling 35 Russian diplomats and Germany is expelling 40. The White House says sanctions alone won't stop the conflict. The US President Joe Biden has called for a war crimes trial over the civilian killings.
You saw what happened in Wootton. This warrants him, he is a war criminal. But we have to gather the information. We have to continue to provide Ukraine with the weapons they need to continue the fight. And we have to gather all the detail so this can be have a war crime trial.
Joe Biden, well away from the war, environmental scientists are warning that without immediate action to cut greenhouse gases, we'll face the catastrophic impacts of climate change. A new UN report says it's necessary to keep temperatures from rising above 1.5 degrees by substantially reducing the use of fossil fuels. The UN Secretary-General, Antonio Guterres, says the world must triple the speed of switching to renewables.
The jury has reached a verdict, and it is damning. This report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is a litany of broken climate promises. It is a file of shame, cataloguing the empty pledges that put us firmly on track towards an unlivable world.
Antonio Guterres. Here, the government is set to sell Channel 4 television, as they say public ownership is holding it back. A Channel 4 spokesperson said it was disappointed with the decision. In an internal email seen by PA News, Channel 4's chief executive said the priority was to look after all staff. The Culture Secretary, Nadine Dorries, says the proceeds of the sale will be reinvested into levelling up the creative sector. And entertainment news, as you've been hearing on Dan Wootton's show, EastEnders star June Brown, best known for playing the character Dot Cotton in EastEnders, has died at the age of 95. Her family says she passed away peacefully at her home in Surrey yesterday. EastEnders executive producer Chris Clenshaw said her portrayal of Dot Cotton made a huge impact on British television, which entertained the nation and at times changed it for the better. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+, you're with GB News. Now more from Dan Wootton tonight.
Tomorrow's news tonight now on our Media Buzz. Just one front page in so far. It is the Metro. And killed for kicks is the headline. Ukraine's President Zelensky has accused Russian troops of slaughtering citizens for pleasure, including the mayor of the village of Motishin, who was kidnapped with her family on March 23rd and found in a shallow grave next to her son and husband and at least 17 other bodies. My superstar panel back with me now, the Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, senior reporter at the newspaper Benjamin Butterworth and social commentator Esther Kraku. Now, breaking tonight on the same topic, an outpouring of international condemnation after an atrocity in Ukraine. Shocking images of mass graves and civilian bodies in the streets of Bucha near Kiev have sparked calls for Vladimir Putin to be put on trial for war crimes. US President Biden again branded the Russian president a war criminal, and Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba today claimed the horrors of Bucha, where at least 410 civilians have reportedly died, are just the tip of the iceberg of Russian brutality. An emotional Zelensky condemned what he called a genocide as he struggled to put his grief into words just hours after making this impassioned speech at the Grammys in Los Angeles last night.
War doesn't let us choose who survives and who stays in eternal silence. Our musicians wear body armor instead of tuxedo. They sing to the wounded in hospitals, even to those who can't hear them, but the music will break through anyway. We defend our freedom to live, to love, to sound. On our land, we are fighting Russia, which brings horrible silence with its bombs, the dead silence. Feel the silence with your music. Feel it today to tell our story.
Zelensky's speech has proven divisive, though, as people grow uncomfortable with the constant collision of geopolitics and showbiz. This was broadcaster Bev Turner's take this morning.
I find these sort of collisions of politics and entertainment a little troubling. I can't lie. That is not to take away from the horrendous situation in Ukraine, the time at which Hollywood and celebrity and showbiz absolutely collided with geopolitics. And I imagine we will never go back.
Zelensky actually saved his most pertinent comments for away from the Grammy stage as he took aim at Western leaders who he claimed enabled Russia's alleged war crimes in Ukraine.
There will definitely be a new sanctions package against Russia, but I'm sure that's not enough. We need more conclusions, not only about Russia, but also about the political behaviour that actually allowed this evil to come to our land. I invite Mrs. Merkel and Mr. Sarkozy to visit Bucha and see what their policy of concessions towards Russia has led to in 14 years. See with your own eyes the tortured Ukrainians and Ukrainian women.
So lots to unpack here. Was it right for Zelensky to be at the Grammys in the middle of the war? And was his criticism of Angela Merkel and Sarkozy justified, Esther Kraku?
Honestly, I think I get it. I get what he is. I understand his approach. And it's clear that, obviously France and Germany have dragged their feet with this a lot more than the UK has. And obviously Boris is now the most popular politician in Ukraine, according to polls, after Zelensky himself. I think one thing, though, is the fact that France and Germany are restrained by the EU and by EU sort of tradition in this sense. They can't just come out and make independent statements. I mean, look at the election in Hungary and how it's been described as like a sinking hole in the EU now. There has to be a united front. So I understand targeting France and Germany, but it's not as simple or straightforward as that. What I do find weird, though, is the fact that he chose to make this speech at the Grammys, because I don't think he's realised how culturally insignificant these award shows have actually become and the kind of disdain most of the public have for these celebrities. I don't know if that was the best place to give this sort of impassioned speech. I understand it's a war of media as well. What I will personally say is, and I could be crucified...
So you didn't think he should have been there, Esther, at all?
I don't think he should have, because those people in that room don't hold the same cultural significance that they did 10 years ago. Most of us think most of these celebrities at award shows are complete hypocrites, which they are. And they spend most of their time preaching to the public about what they think is right when they couldn't even find Ukraine on a map a few weeks ago, with all due respect.
Yeah.
I do think, though, that he is right, and I've most recently sort of moved on this issue, that there should be a no-fly zone implemented, because this is absolute butchery.
You think they should?
They should. These people are being butchered, they're being slaughtered. Putin has no limits, the ruble has recovered, so clearly the sanctions haven't been working.
OK. A lot to pick up there, but Carol, I saw you shaking your head furiously when Esther criticised Zelensky for going to the Grammys. Carol, this is a room of Showbiz deplorables. Why is he lowering himself by speaking to them?
It's not about that. He knows that's going out to the world. It doesn't matter who's in the room. This is something that's going to go out to the world.
So it's PR?
He's fighting a different kind of war here. You know, he knows after the invasion of Crimea in 2014, Putin spun lies about what the Ukrainians were doing there. He said Ukrainians were pulling fetuses out of women, they were crucifying children. He said that the Nazi brigade of Ukrainians were going around killing people. He's fighting, he's now, I'm looking for a word that's not a swear word, he's done for the Russians with fake news now. And every opportunity he gets, he goes on TV or wherever and he puts out the truth. He's fighting a war for truth. And yes, it looked a bit showbiz what he was doing. But the bottom line is, we've got to remember, he learned the last time from Crimea. He's now fighting a different war. And I think he was totally right today to criticise Germany and Germany and France. Do you know, since this war began 35 days ago, Putin has made £19 billion from Europe in oil and gas. So much for the sanctions. So he's right. The
ruble has recovered, Carol.
He's right, yes. And so he's right to criticise these countries. This was a piece in the Times today. You know, Germany, Macron, I think it was the Polish president said today, he said to Macron, stop negotiating with criminals. This is what you're doing here. And he's absolutely right.
At this point, the West is not doing anything because sanctions were their main target against
Well, Europe
Russia.
is not sticking.
They're not working.
Europe
Sanctions
is not
are
sticking to
working.
the sanctions. No. Germany gets 50 to 60% of its gas from there.
And there's a cost of living.
Do you know what the Baltic states did today? They actually cut all Russian gas off. These are states that really can't afford to do it, but they've done it.
But they could end up like Ukraine if Ukraine falls.
What they've done frantically is they've built a terminal for liquefied gas, and they've just said to Russia, now stuff your gas. Europe, the great I am that is Europe, has not done that.
Well, France in particular, and Macron has been a disgrace. And by the way, he's achieved nothing in all of those phone calls with Putin. I think it's just so embarrassing for him. Benjamin, on the whole Grammys issue, that collision of showbiz and politics, which I'm going to say I side with Esther and I feel uncomfortable about it. Who are you with?
Well, I mean, I think it made a lot of sense because, as Carol points out, it's not really about the people in the room. It's about the fact that by giving those comments to the Grammys, we're talking about it and airing it now. So it's a clever way to do it.
Talking about
and the truth is that we have a PR war here. He needs to keep the public's attention because we're more than a month into this heinous war. And so he has to find the way that keeps the world looking. Second to that, frankly, we live in the world we live in, and those people have short attention span. Very famous people in that room do influence.
With respect to you two, your discomfort is irrelevant and really irrelevant in all this. Zelensky is not allowing people all throughout the world to become inured or complacent to what's happening in Ukraine. You saw those pictures just now. Dead bodies lying in the street, tanks upon tanks, wrecked. You saw what women are getting raped. Women's heads are being shaved, and Zelensky is making that known. And I think I don't care how he makes that known.
Putin can go on for ages. Yes. Putin can keep this up for as long as he wants. No, because the reality is there is no real fight back against Russia because the sanctions clearly haven't worked.
No, they haven't.
Germany is still using up Russian gas and oil like there's no tomorrow. And he is getting his way. There are the rumours that there's going to be a new trade deal between Russia and India. So India will be getting a lot of cheap gas from Russia and paying it in rubles.
But Europe and various other countries have let this situation happen with Putin. You know, when Merkel gave the go-ahead for Nord Stream, what she actually said was, you know, this is business, not politics. Hello. And all of Europe said there'll never be a war in Europe again, so we can take gas from Putin.
Okay, final word, Benjamin.
Esther hits on a very important point about India, which is a member of the Commonwealth, and frankly, I think we should be having serious consequences for India that it is taking Russia's side in this atrocity.
At this point, it's not that simple.
Well, from politics to showbiz, Zelensky might be fighting a war, but could he write the lyric, I'm not cool, I'm not smart, and I can't even parallel park? Well, that's why Olivia Rodrigo, the 19-year-old behind the UK #1 singles driver's licence and Good For You, was the star of the Grammys, taking home Best New Artist, Best Pop Vocal Album and Best Pop Solo Performance. Also bagging 3 gongs, Best Rock Album, Rock Song and Rock Performance, with the Foo Fighters, their moment of glory coming just 1 week after the shock death of their drummer Taylor Hawkins. The 50-year-old was honoured with a special montage in the slot where the band had been scheduled to perform, while Billie Eilish, who last week picked up an Oscar for her Bond-themed No Time to Die, wore a T-shirt with Taylor's image. There you see it. An unlikely loser at last night's ceremony, though, given all of the wokies in the room, Barack Obama, 44th President of the United States, lost Best Spoken Word album for his latest memoir, Promised Land. And in the fashion stakes, New Rules singer Dua Lipa and rapper Megan Thee Stallion suffered a fashion faux pas when they took to the stage in matching outfits. But of course, this was not a coincidence. It was all for a skit referencing Mariah and Whitney's stunt. Remember that? At the VMAs. That's when music was good, people, in 1998. And the pair were soon saved from embarrassment by none other than Donatella Versace, willingly wearing the same dress. Apparently, that's what counts as bravery in La La Land. Esther Kraku, Benjamin Butterworth, Carol Malone, do stand by, because coming up, Bobby's on the sofa? I don't think so. I'm dead against this plan, right? You're not going to believe this. That would have the police working from home. But what do my superstar panel think? Find out at 10:30. But next, are the left underplaying female anger at the growing trans athlete row? British long-distance runner Mara Yamauchi joins me to speak up for her sporting sisters straight after the break.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
Now, trans women's place in sport is one of the most hotly contested issues in the world right now. And in the latest development, a 6-foot trans goalie who used to play men's football has been selected for England University's women's side. So this is 32-year-old Blair Hamilton, who was born as a biological male but identifies as female. And they will take one of the coveted spots in the national squad within weeks. It's the latest lightning rod in the debate after cyclist Emily Bridges, who competed as a man until a few weeks ago, was barred from racing in the national championships against women on Saturday. And prior to that, of course, 6'1" trans swimmer Leah Thomas drew worldwide attention as she powered past female Olympian Emma Wayant in the NCAA Women's Championships. Well, my next guest is a legend of the female sporting world, Team GB's third fastest marathon runner ever and Commonwealth Games medalist winner. Mara Yamauchi says female sportswomen are now too scared to speak out against transgender athletes for fear of being cancelled. Well, luckily, Mara isn't scared, and I'm delighted to say she joins me now. Mara, this is a real concern, isn't it? The fact that female athletes are too scared to vocalise what's going on in their sport for fear of being cancelled.
Absolutely. We heard last week that the female cyclists who were to be up against male-born Emily Bridges on Saturday were too scared to speak up. And I'm not surprised, because British Cycling have a policy which states that you must accept somebody in the gender in which they present. So if you have a biological male claiming to be a woman, you cannot challenge that. In the last few days, several female athletes in athletics, some of whom are currently competing, bravely spoke up, and they've faced abuse on Twitter, being called transphobes, people targeting their sources of income. So we know that female athletes are abused, are silenced, just told to shut up. And so it's not surprising that they are scared to speak up.
No, indeed, especially when, if you look at British Cycling, for example, they have an organisation that seems to care more about what Stonewall have to say than what their own female competitors think.
Yeah, British Cycling issued a statement on, I believe it was Wednesday last week, announcing that Emily Bridges wouldn't be competing. Not once in that statement were women's sport or female athletes mentioned. Not once. It was all about Emily Bridges and inclusion of trans and non-binary athletes. This is about the future of women's sport. And I've seen evidence that British Cycling has been captured by Stonewall and other groups pushing gender identity ideology. And unfortunately, Stonewall misrepresents the law. The Equality Act is very clear. It has a very clear single-sex exemption for sport, which allows for sport to be divided by sex into male and female, and to ban biological males from competing in the female category.
I completely agree, and Mara, I think we're together on this. And some people would say it's an extreme point of view. I don't think it is. I think we just have to be very clear that no matter what the sport is, people can only compete in the sex that they were biologically born into. Because if you open it up in any other way, you go down a slippery slope, I believe, to threatening the very future of women's sport.
Yes, I agree completely. The reason sport is separated by sex is because males have massive physical advantages compared to females. For example, 10% in running, 19% in jumping, 160% in punching power. And every year, the very best female in, let's say, the 100-metre dash is beaten by many thousands of men and boys. So if women's sport did not exist, female athletes who are household names like myself, Paula Radcliffe, Sharon Davis, we would be nobodies. Nobody would have ever heard of us. So this is why women's sport exists. It is created for people who are biologically female, and therefore males should not be in it under any circumstances. You mentioned Blair Hamilton in your introduction. If we look at team sports, because a biological male is included on the England University's team, that means a female has been excluded from that team. If we look at the the sort of activities involved in football. Running, as I said, males outperform females 10%. Jumping, which often, jumping to head the ball in football, 19%. Height, males are on average 9% taller than females. They have longer limbs. Their femurs are on average 9% longer. Their humerus bones, which is the upper arm bone, 12% longer. So for somebody who plays in goal, as Blair Hamilton does, being male provides a massive advantage. And the fix which sports bodies have come up with to allow males into the female category is testosterone suppression. But the evidence is very clear this does not work to remove male advantage. And things like height and limb length never change. Skeleton shape never changes under any amount of testosterone suppression. So it is unfair for females having males in their category.
No, indeed. All of the science that I'm looking at makes it increasingly clear that no matter how much you bring down the hormone levels, you cannot reverse the impact of male puberty. And it's interesting you speak about female team sports. I mean, I'm a big supporter of the London Pulse netball team, and I was at their game over the weekend. And there's 7 people in a netball team on a court at one time. If even one of them was a biological male, you might as well wave goodbye to a fair game. Yeah. Sorry, you come in.
I've played. I mean, I grew up playing netball as a female-only game, and then as an adult, I played mixed netball. It was a totally different game. We were up against these tall, massive, strong males. It was completely different. Males do not belong in women's sport, and your viewers need to ask themselves, on a women's sports team, whether it's netball, football, hockey, whatever, how many males on a women's sports team is okay? 100%? 60%? 20%? If you look at it like that, even one male on a women's sports team is unacceptable and it's unfair. So,
it is.
Any male advantage in the female category is unfair. You will hear people like Joanna Harper from Loughborough University. She's frequently in the media talking about what she calls meaningful competition. And what she means by that is, if we can reduce the male advantage somewhat, a bit, then it provides meaningful competition in the female category. This is a nonsense. What female athletes need is fair competition, and you cannot have that with male-bodied people in the female category.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for being brave enough to speak out, Mara Yamauchi, because I know what personal abuse it brings you, but you're doing the right thing, and It's a pleasure to have you today. Of course, we do bring you both sides of the story here at GB News. So in a statement, I believe it was released over the weekend, Emily Bridges, that trans cyclist, said, "I have provided both British Cycling and the UCI with medical evidence that I meet the eligibility criteria, for transgender female cyclists. I am an athlete and I just want to race competitively again. No one should have to choose between being who they are and participating in the sport that they love." Coming up in Uncancelled, is the MSM's COVID flip-flopping to blame for scepticism about the war in Ukraine? Writer and lawyer Helen Dale, who became a Ukraine expert while researching a book, is uncancelled shortly. The next in the Media Buzz, can police do their jobs working from home? No way, I say, but will my panel's arguments prove more arresting? Find out straight after the break.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
Let's return to tomorrow's news tonight now in the media buzz. Lots of front pages in now. The Guardian's headline, it's now or never if the world is to stave climate disaster. I mean, this could have been a front page from 1974, 1985, 1990, but here we are in 2022, as according, of course, to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, who predict greenhouse gas emissions can be nearly halved this decade. The Daily Telegraph leads with the brilliant news, which I'm celebrating tonight. Woohoo! And we'll talk about this lots more on the show tomorrow. Channel 4 finally set to be taken private. A foreign owner could now step in as the broadcaster goes up for sale with a likely £1 billion asking price. Lots of people commenting on what I've had to say about Channel 4 going private. I'm not saying, by the way, I want every staff member and every journalist at Channel 4 to be sacked. What I am simply saying is we have a blatantly left-wing organisation that has run a blatantly left-wing news service for decades and decades, and they can go into the commercial sector and see if they can survive, just like we're trying to do here at GB News. But the fact that I, as a taxpayer, that we all own this organisation that claims to be an impartial one and is nothing of the kind has made me sick for some time, and loads of Tory governments have promised to do something about Channel 4 and have failed. So good on Nadine Dorries and Boris Johnson for finally putting their money where their mouth is. Now, we've been talking about identity politics, of course, all night, and gender politics, and this is a big win for women's rights. Here on the front page of the Daily Mail, gyms, hospitals and shops will be legally able to offer single-sex services, the Equalities Watchdog has said. It comes after years of uncertainty over whether services such as refuges for female rape victims are allowed to exclude trans people who were born as a man. On the front of the Times, Britain has demanded maximum sanctions against Russia as the US called for President Putin to be put on trial for war crimes. A deadline for ending Western use of Russian oil and gas has been urged by the UK after what it called barbaric crimes by Russian forces in Ukraine. And the Eye reports on the European split on funding for Putin's war. Berlin is accused of standing in the way of the continent using tougher sanctions against Russia. My superstar panel back now. Carol Malone of the Daily Express, Benjamin Butterworth of the Eye newspaper, and the social commentator Esther Kraku. Now, with the kind of voices we welcome on the show, I'm familiar with the concept of a Twitter jail. I haven't been there yet myself, but I probably will be soon. But a Zoom arrest, well, that's a whole new level of madness. And this is, of course, in reference to the news that police officers of the future could be allowed to work from home and select their own hours, according to the newly elected president of the Police Superintendents Association. So former DCI Paul Fotheringham, who spent almost 30 years in the Kent force, said while there would still be a need for frontline workers to, quote, run out of stations and tackle bad guys, Over half of current workers do not respond to emergencies and could therefore be eligible to define their own rotas thanks to technologies introduced in, wait for it, lockdown. Of course, it's a lockdown. Now, he claimed a rise in desk-based roles was necessary to combat rising fraud and cybercrime offences, improve diversity in the ranks, allow more women to achieve senior positions and prevent officers from being forced to choose between career and family time. But I'm sorry, this makes me so mad. The presence of fewer coppers on the street can only be a bad thing. I want bobbies on the beat, not on the damn sofa in their underwear watching loose women. This is the police we're talking about, not some trendy, woke San Francisco tech company. Honestly, Carol Malone, what is going on?
The reason we have so much unsolved crime in this country is because of ninnies like Paul Fotherington, these woke coppers. You know, it makes me want to scream when I hear a senior copper. And this speech, this statement he put out the other day, he was talking about diversity, inclusion, flexi hours. I didn't hear him say a single word about solving crime. You know, I didn't hear him say a single word about keeping people safe. He was saying how much crime has changed. Well, in his work world it has, because it's all about crime, social media crime.
And what about someone coming to see us when we've just been mugged or burgled?
The crimes that really matter to people are the burglaries and the robberies and the muggings, and cops don't seem to want to do that anymore. And the idea that you can have a copper at home and he gets a call and says there's a bloke being stabbed, 2 miles away. He could be in Waitrose getting a few bits for his wife. He could be in the doctor's at an appointment, and he's been called to some emergency, and we're laughing, but it's not funny. Yeah. The coppers, it's a public service, and they've taken half our police stations away, and now they're going to take away half the coppers in the police stations. So who do the public go to when they have a problem?
But Benjamin, you unbelievably support bobbies not on the beat, but bobbies on their pants watching loose women on the sofa. You want this.
Well, thanks for the impartial intro to my comments. Look, it's amazing what policing you can do. A friend of mine...
yes, it is, from the sofa.
She had to do a speeding awareness course, and she could do that digitally, although I did think it was ironic to do a speeding awareness course on Zoom. Okay.
Has your friend ever had to catch a criminal?
But I tell you what,
what
I think is important is that lots of policing is investigations and paperwork that is done at an office desk, and that can be done just as much at home as in an office.
So this is encouraging fewer.
And so I think you talk about bobbies on the beat. Well, I want as many Bettys as bobbies on the beat, and some of them who are mothers, new mothers, it may well mean they can go back to work and do their jobs
better. Did you see that video of those
because they can do some at home
that tried to restrain that criminal against a car? Just necked one of them in the jaw and walked off. Because he was trying to be restrained by 2 women, which just goes to show anyway.
I see you stopped caring about women's rights, Esther.
I'm sorry, but this is common sense. If 2 female officers can't restrain a male criminal, then that's not really very much for policing.
But can I just ask you a question? Do you actually think...
Or maybe you should have a trans woman.
Do you actually... Are you listening to me? Are you just going to start a Barney and try and win another fight, which you won't? Do you actually believe that people who work from home work as hard as they do when they're in an office?
Yes.
See, I don't accept it.
You are deluded.
You are deluded.
You are absolutely deluded.
You are.
Because the reality is that when people are at home, they are far more distracted, and that is just a fact.
Work from home.
No, I don't.
Well, we work for the same.
I don't work for.
We work for the same company. I've never seen you in the building, right?
He's in one right now.
I have my own office.
He avoids you, sir. This is where it all comes out.
No. I have my... Benjamin, Rebecca Reed tried exactly the same trick on me, actually, on the sofa. I hire my own office because I very much believe the sanctity of my own private space at home. And so I wake up in the morning, I go to my own office, I do my columns for the Mail Online there, I do my prep for my show there. Don't you asked? I'm just telling you. Benjamin, you asked, so I'm just telling you.
Your own office,
and then
home office.
It's completely different. I'm in an office.
He's not a policeman.
I'm surrounded by people.
He's not a policeman.
Yes.
You know the thing is,
because it's the idea that you can't work in private.
But
I'm just making the point, Esther, that Benjamin tried to say that I work from home, and I don't work from home.
Even if you did, it wouldn't matter because you're not a police. But you know this crazy idea of trying to wrap these police officers in cotton wool, basically. There is a report out from the West Midlands Police that there are parents that are picking up young police recruits prostitutes that are complaining because they have to do overtime.
Oh yeah,
Or,
they don't.
or the fact that some of them are have to work late.
And the mothers go and say, "You've kept my boy too long."
Exactly.
Should have been finished.
How are we better off by making it harder for some people to do their job as a police officer?
What following the job description?
If you just have a kid, right, and you know, maybe you're a single mother, how would it be easier for you to do the job if you can't do part of it?
Okay, final word to Carol.
Shift patterns are part of the police force. If you can't do shifts and you don't want to do shift works, don't apply to the police.
Well, then we have fewer police, and no one's won.
OK, one more front page just in, and I wanted to show you this. The Sun leads, of course, on the sad death of June Brown, who played chain-smoking Dot Cotton in EastEnders for 35 years. She passed away at home yesterday, surrounded by her family, aged 95, and June lit up Albert Square. Very good headline there, referencing her chain smoking. Of course, as I said earlier in the show, June will go down as the human representation of a golden age of the genre when the nation would stop to watch their nightly performances. Let's take a quick look at the icon of soaps in action.
I've got to face facts. With my nerves, I've got to smoke. You silly little man! Jim, it is important that we find out what the youth of today is doing with themselves. I don't want... Oh, I say. If it's money you're after, you're looking in the wrong place.
Sorry, Ma. Everything I ever put you through.
Hello, Jim. It's me, Dorothy.
She's been a part of this place for more years than I care to remember.
And while we celebrate the legend today, I can't shake the feeling of deep regret that EastEnders missed the opportunity to give both her and Dot Cotton, the character she expertly created, the send-off they had deserved. Last May, replying to a fan letter, June actually revealed, the reason I left was because I no longer recognised the character they were writing for me, so I'm afraid you won't see me again. They are already mentioning my character in the current episode, so what rubbish they will write about me is anyone's guess. How devastating that that's how she felt. And this was the pitiful tribute they paid to her at the end of tonight's offering of EastEnders before they rehashed an old documentary of her from 2017. And I've actually written a column about this whole scandal. It's a scandal in my books for the Mail Online today, saying that bosses like to hammer home the attitude that no actor is bigger than the soap, but if there's one actor who could be trusted impeccably to know what's right for her character, then surely that person was June Brown. What soap boss could truly claim they understood Dot Cotton better than her? Carol Malone, genuinely love June Brown, but I just think it's a real disgrace that the BBC and EastEnders put their own petty internal politics ahead of actually getting her back. Because, you know, for Barbara Windsor, they got her back. They did that beautiful final episode, and we'll never get to see that with Dot Cotton. And even though they'll probably write out Dot Cotton, we know that June Brown, the woman who was Dot Cotton, didn't approve of what they did.
No, but, you know, as disappointing as that was for her, you know, she was what, 95? She's had a fantastic life. She's well recognised for what she did. She had a great life. I love the fact she was smoking right until the very end. I love that. And, you know, that
the doctors told her not to give up, apparently.
Well, exactly. And I love the fact she was as outspoken as she wanted to be till the very end. And I think that, you know, lots of people, although I'm sad that she's gone, when you hear her age, you go, that was a great innings. She had a good life.
Indeed, but shame on the BBC bench for not giving her the proper send-off.
I do think it was a terrible shame. I would have loved to have seen that episode. You remember the death of Ethel was one of the most beautiful moments ever on British soaps. But, you know, Michael Cashman, who was in EastEnders and was a friend of June Brown for 40 years, he wrote a lovely piece for tomorrow's newspaper. He saw her recently and she said to him, I'm ready to go. So we know that she lived her life.
That's lovely, isn't it, Esther?
Yeah, definitely.
At 95.
Definitely.
At 95. OK, Esther Kaku, Benjamin Butterworth, Carol Malone, do stand by, because coming up, my superstar panel will nominate for tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. But next, in Uncancelled, with their COVID coverage prompting significant amounts of Ukraine scepticism, have the MSM ensured we will never trust them again. Helen Dale in just a few seconds. First, though, here's what's coming up in tomorrow's show.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, should the propaganda of the Ukraine war be a reminder to the West that free speech is worth fighting for? Top columnist Mick Hume debates. Plus, there's an emotional update from one of our Ukrainian commentators on the ground. Elsewhere in the show, GB News stars Nigel Farage and Darren Grimes are let loose on the topics that matter most to you. And I'll break down the headlines of the day and the newspaper front pages with my superstar panel. The broadcaster and Loose Women star Carol McGiffin, Conservative voice Calvin Robinson, and making her debut, the economic commentator Miata Fanbula. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
Good show coming up tomorrow. Make sure you're with us from 9 p.m. But it's time now for Uncancelled. And this is where the world's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. After 2 years of relentless scaremongering and promoting draconian policies to restrict people's freedoms, it's really no surprise that faith in the mainstream media is at an all-time low. The narrative of fear spouted by doomsday scientists was adopted by the MSN without any scrutiny, and freedom-loving Brits feel betrayed by media who were cheerleaders for several ruinous lockdowns. But this information crisis is having a detrimental effect on the military crisis in Ukraine, as many folks struggle to regain trust in a media that misled them so regularly throughout the pandemic. Well, writer and lawyer Alan Dale became a bit of an expert on Ukraine when researching her debut novel, The Hand That Signed the Paper 30 years ago. And she joins me now. Helen, I know you've been looking into this whole issue of distrust in the media and how the COVID coverage is related to how people feel about the way the mainstream media is covering the war. But let me just start by posing this question to you. Why on earth should we trust a word that the BBC News, ITV News or Sky News tell us after the way they've reported COVID over the past 2 years?
I perhaps should provide a little bit of context here. I wrote this book, The Hand That Signed the Paper. It's about Ukraine, it's set in Ukraine, and I perceive for some reason for stuff in this book to be perceptive on this crisis. For example, I foresaw the invasion, Putin's invasion. So that's the background to this. And quite a lot of my commentary initially was just Ukrainian history, a bit about the culture, a bit about the Second World War, a bit about the Holodomor, the Ukrainian famine, and why, for example, Vladimir Putin was constantly referring to Ukrainian Nazis, and that has actually happened again today in another publication from Izvestia in Russia. And then it became very clear to me, particularly on the Nazis point, I spent a lot of time having to point out that whilst there used to be Nazis in Ukraine, there aren't now. And my commentary and my coverage began to change from fairly straight historical information based on The Hand That Signed the Paper to having to rebut various claims that people were making about the war in Ukraine. From the quite outlandish, I had people suggesting that there was no war in Ukraine, that all the pictures you were seeing of injured people, both Russians and Ukrainians, by the way, in this case, were all crisis actors. They weren't real. They were just acting. So that was one extreme. And then you got other things. You got various other people repeating pro-Putin propaganda. And it was quite extraordinary to me because these were people who, some of whom I am aware of on social media and have been for some years, were supporting the Canadian truckers in Ottawa on civil liberties basis, which I was as well, and had suddenly decided that everything that proceeded from the mouth of a dictator and a dictatorship was proceeding as if from the mouth of God. And I sat down and I wrote a few pieces about this. I wrote a big piece for Law and Liberty, which is where I'm senior writer in the United States, wrote some pieces for CapX. I've been on media outlets across the spectrum, not just GB News, trying to explain what I thought was going on. And my initial thought was what you described at the beginning, that the press disgraced itself with COVID, particularly the fact checkers who just they were supposed to be checking facts and they produced nonsense, often innumerate nonsense. The press was badly exposed for innumeracy. You also had the problem of, lockdowns were bad and then they were good and then they were bad, and then coronavirus came from a bat in a wet market in Wuhan and then it didn't. Then it came from a lab and then maybe it didn't again and now maybe it did. Look, all of this constant wrenching about of the public in the name of the science when the scientists themselves hadn't worked it out. So at first, in my big piece for Law and Liberty I wrote on the Ukraine war and this phenomenon, I blamed mainly the COVID coverage. But in the most recent piece I wrote for CapX, which is called The Fog of News, which you've kindly retweeted of mine, I think it goes back. It goes back before COVID, and it goes back to some of the coverage of Brexit in this country, which was very irresponsible. And a lot of the pollsters need a whack for that. Not all of them. I mean, the old wait for Servation joke is a legitimate one. Servation were very good, and as a general rule, YouGov seem to be, but they both have fallen off the perch at various times. So bad and dishonest polling. Bad and dishonest coverage of the debates in 2019, like the way, for example, unless you were a Westminster insider, I was covering Brexit for The Australian, which is the main national daily in Australia. People just outside of the bubble did not realise the extent to which John Bercow was loathed and hated by all sides of the House and was an appalling bully, this kind of thing. And then and then in the United States, they had their own parallel universe with Donald Trump, which bled a little bit over here, but not that much. And so all of this just created a perfect storm that ran into the abysmal COVID coverage.
Got it.
And now we've got a situation where people are being sceptical of aspects of the war in Ukraine, which they shouldn't be sceptical of. And yet you've got people not seeming to understand that there is a war on. You do have the fog of news. You need to take both sides' propaganda with a pinch of salt. I mean, obviously the Russians are telling more lies. They have more to hide. They are the dictatorship. The lies that they have told, for example, about the atrocities in Bucha, north of Kyiv, are a good example of that. But by the same token, you may recall early in the war, there were all this footage of the ghost of Kyiv, apparently a Ukrainian air ace who had 10 kills, and it was footage from a video game. So everybody has to keep their wits about them. And I say that as someone who strongly supports Ukrainian self-determination against this invasion, that we've now created a rod for our own back. And with dishonest coverage of a number of things, and in my piece for CapX, I talk about the trans issue, where Leah Thomas, the face, was photoshopped to make it look more feminine, and the chin was narrowed, and the Adam's apple
So the media continue, even today, Helen, not to do themselves any favours. But
they're not doing any favours, no.
And of course, you can read that piece by coming to one of our Twitter pages, Helen Dale. Thank you so much. But it's time now to reveal today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. My superstar panel return. Carol Malone, your Greatest Britain nominee.
All right, mine are the three ladies we talked about earlier. Maya Forstater, Carolyn Fisk and Heather Binning. These are the girls who've fought a move to protect women's rights and to question politicians on their stance on gender politics.
Yes, respect my sex if you want my ex. Benjamin, your nominee.
Well, it has to be today the late, great June Brown, OBE, MBE, but she was never knighted, which I think was a terrible mistake.
She should be a dame.
Maybe we can make up for that now with a Greatest Britain.
She should be a dame, absolutely. Esther Kraku, your nominee.
My nominee is Baron Bridges, who, for once, the mainstream media has decided to report on the many issues that traditional Conservative voters are having with this very unconservative government. And I just had to give him a shout-out because his piece for The Telegraph was completely spot on.
Well, this doesn't happen very often, but I'm going to agree with Benjamin Butterworth. Of course, Dame June Brown, and I'm just going to call her Dame June Brown from now on. Shame on anyone who made the decision not to give her that damehood. But of course, she is today's Greatest Britain. Rest in peace, June. Union Jackass time now. Carol Malone, your nominee.
I got four of them: Prince Andrew, Fergie, Beatrice and Eugenie.
The whole family.
They all took money off this Turkish fraud, so there's a court case going on. They're not involved in any of that. But between them, they took £1 million off this guy. And their defence is, oh, well, we didn't know he was a bad man. Anyway, not good enough.
No. Prince Andrew, of course, did return some of the money, but why? It is all unravelling for that family, I agree, Carol. Benjamin Butterworth, your nominee.
My Union Jackass is the odious big mouth Liam Gallagher. His son was found to have stolen from a local Tesco shop. Rather than Liam telling his son off for doing that, like the judge did, instead he defended his thieving little son.
No, I completely agree. Liam Gallagher is a scumbag. And when you've got a scumbag of a father like that, unfortunately, very often you create scumbag children. And the tweets from this vile, repulsive Liam Gallagher to the judge who said, Judge Judy can kiss my heir from one entitled heir to another as you were. What sort of example does this man set to his son? And by the way, this was a revolting case, which also involved Ringo Starr's grandson, believe it or not, who actually, these people were just revolting to staff workers in a Tesco Express. So the entitled one is you, Liam Gallagher, and shame on you. Esther Krakow, your union Jackass?
Mine is short and sweet. The Guardian calling the Falklands the Malvinas on the anniversary of the Falklands War. You know what? There's really nothing more to say here. That is just completely ridiculous.
Yeah, and we discussed it.
If you give Butterworth the double tonight, we're all walking up.
Well, you're going to have to walk out, Caroline, because it's the first time this has ever happened. A double win for Benjamin Butterworth. I can't believe I've agreed with Benjamin Butterworth twice in one night. It will never happen again, that I promise you. Carol Malone, Esther Krakow, Benjamin Butterworth, thank you for not walking off. I'm back again tomorrow from 9 o'clock. Headliners is next, though. I'll see you again tomorrow night. Good night.
Hello again. A wet day to come across Scotland tomorrow, whereas much of the UK will be dry and bright. But it's not just rain for Scotland, because across the north of Scotland we could see some heavy snow, and there is a Met Office yellow warning in place. For most it's turned a lot milder. In between these two weather fronts is some pretty warm air, but this one is sinking south, allowing the cold air to return across the far north. So some wintry showers across Shetland and Orkney. Damp for northern England, particularly to the west of the Pennines. Rain for Northern Ireland and western Scotland overnight. A bit of drizzly here and there across Wales and southwest England, but much of southern England, eastern England will have a dry night. And look at the temperatures. A mild night, but that cold air in place across the far north means there will be a frost, and with that cold air hitting the wet weather, we're going to see more and more snow coming in during Tuesday. Now, initially just over the hills, but coming down to lower levels across Aberdeenshire, Caithness, Sutherland, could cause some disruptions, certainly by the time we get to Wednesday morning. For central and southern Scotland, it will be rain. We'll see rain working back to Northern Ireland later on in the day, but for most of the day dry here, and certainly for most of England and Wales. It's a dry, fine day on Tuesday, a bit brighter than Monday, some sunshine in